rewatch it if you want to. So thank you so much, Mark Jordan, for presenting this for us, and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Holly. I am the director of the Office of Primary Care at RHIG, which most of you are probably aware is the State Department of Health and Environmental Control. My office is funded by HRSA, Federal Health Resources and Services Administration. There's an office like mine in every state, usually in the state health department. We are tasked with doing everything we can to improve access to primary care services. That's not just primary medical care, but also dental and mental health as well. One of the primary functions of the office that we are specifically tasked with is applying for and maintaining federal shortage designations, health professional shortage areas, or HPSAs and MUAs. These are, as I said, federal designations. The map that's on this slide here shows the primary medical care HPSAs for the state. As you'll see, everything that's in blue is a HPSA. So almost the whole state. There are 3 or 4 exceptions. The darker blue are very rural counties, if you're familiar with the state, and those have a specific type of designation. They're geographic designation. The implication from that is that everyone in those counties has difficulty accessing care, regardless of their socioeconomic status, because resources are limited. The lighter blue color, the indication there is that the low-income population has difficulty accessing care. That's basically true for everywhere in South Carolina, even the counties that are the areas that are not designated just because they didn't meet the federal criteria. But as you're probably aware, South Carolina did not expand Medicaid when we had the opportunity a few years ago. And as a result, we still have a significant population that does not have a payment source. And regardless of where you are, including Columbia, Greenville, and Charleston, if you don't have payment source, you have difficulty accessing care, regardless of the resources that are around, or you access care, I don't say inappropriately, but not in a traditional primary care setting, more likely an emergency room setting. So our charge with the program, so I'm going to talk about state incentives, and I'm going to talk about federal loan repayment programs today. But those for the state program at least, those darker colored counties, those that are listed at the bottom of the slide, are the counties that are highest priority. You'll see the State Office of Rural Health, South Carolina Office of Rural Health, and South Carolina AHEC slides in here. Those organizations are also funded by HRSA, and they're also access focused, and we work together, the 3 of us, to recruit or to work on recruitment programs in the state. Brittany, if you'd advance the slide, please. Okay, thank you. There are 3 basic programs that I want to talk about. One is the South Carolina Rural Physician Incentive Program, and then there are 2 that are under the National Service Corps. I mentioned that one of the primary care office primary functions is shortage designation. Another is to be the state liaison to the National Health Service Corps. And we're going to talk about the National Service Corps loan repayment program and the Student to Service program, which I think would be of special interest to med students. Next slide, please. I mentioned my partners at South Carolina AHEC and the South Carolina Office of Rural Health. Kristen Cochran is the Director of Recruitment and Retention Programs at South Carolina AHEC. So any questions that you have about the state incentive program could be directed to Kristen. Her contact information is on a slide later in this deck. You could advance it, please. Okay, the South Carolina Rural Physician Program has been around since 1989, and it provides incentive grants to primary care physicians and advanced practice professionals, nurse practitioners, and PAs, and to date has funded 425 physicians and 81 advanced practice providers. It's an incentive grant, not loan repayment. So an individual who's applying may not have any school loans. It's unusual, but it's not unheard of. So they would still be eligible to apply for the program. Advance the slide, please. Here are is the funding that program offers. If you're going to a rural county, a county with a population of less than 50,000 people, it provides $25,000 a year for up to 4 years. Now, again, it's an incentive grant, not loan repayment. So you get $25,000 per year at the end of the year. If you leave early, there's no penalty, but you don't get your money. So if you stay for 4 full years, you would get $100,000 through that program. There's a halftime option with that program, which if the clinician only wants to work 20 hours a week or up, they have to work at least 20 hours a week, and they would get half that amount. There's a lesser award, $15,000 for 4 years for clinicians who are working in rural areas of other counties that are larger than 50, but the rural portions. For, say, Richland County, most of Richland County is urban. But if you get down in the lower Richland area of Hopkins, down where Lower Richland High School is, and below in Harrell Hill and Eastover, those areas are considered rural. Or if you're working in an urban area for a federally qualified health center, you would qualify. Now, I'm going to talk just for a second about FQHCs. There are community health centers. We have 21 community health center organizations in the state. Eau Claire Cooperative is the one that's most visible here in the Midlands. They have sites in Richland, Lexington, Fairfield, and Newberry County. There are 21 of those organizations. They are also funded by HRSA. So you're hearing of, as is the National Service Corps. So they, by obeying the rules of HRSA to be a community health center, also meet National Service Corps criteria. So the vast majority of National Service Corps placements are in federally qualified health centers, and a number are also of their clinicians also apply for the rural physician program. So we make a special qualifier for FQHC providers that are working even in urban areas. Next slide, please. Here's the selection criteria for the rural physician program. There's 5 areas are listed. The second one, specialty, 20 points possible. Family medicine gets 20 points. Family medicine is by far and family medicine physicians are by far the discipline and specialty most requested by the rural and the practices in rural and underserved areas that we work with. I don't know of any. I mentioned there are 21 community health center organizations in the state. All of them could use a family practitioner right now. I know that without calling them. It's an ongoing need. They need the flexibility that a family physician offers, and they also their workforce model has evolved over the years and now incorporates a lot of nurse practitioners and PAs. Most of the family physicians working in those areas are asked to precept nurse practitioners and PAs so that they can get, but a lot of times they have all the nurse practitioners and PAs that they can hire unless they bring on more physicians to precept. So that's going to be a component of the work usually in rural areas. Just wanted to make sure that got included. But of these, if your community need and retention factors, community need is based on the needs of the shortage area that the community or the practice opportunity is in, and that's most important. Retention factors have to do with things like where you went to school, where you grew up, where your spouse or significant other may have grown up, what other ties you may have to that community that over time have proven to be successful retention factors. So if you went to USC School of Medicine, that would be, you would get priority over someone who went to University of California. Underrepresented minorities are defined as African Americans and Hispanic ethnicities. And then there's a committee recommendation. The committee is comprised of myself, Kristen Cochran, who works at AHEC, whose information you saw previously, and Jessica Seal of the South Carolina Office of Rural Health. But there is a larger rural physician board that approves, or we make recommendations, and then they approve. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this is state money, and this is an incentive program, not loan repayment. It can be used for student loans, certainly, but it is not a loan repayment program per se. There is a half-time option available, and the program allows physicians and advanced practice providers to work in state prisons as well as traditional primary care settings. And the program has a lot. I mean, the application period is open now for 2021, and it closes on March 15th of each year. Awards are made usually before the end of the state fiscal year, which is June 30th. Next slide, please. This is a relatively new component of the rural physician program. If you're going to a very high need area, which were those the dark blue counties in the first slide, then you can get $30,000 per year for up to 4 years. So a total of $120,000 for 4 years. First come, first served. Eligible providers who commit to those areas early on in the process. So worst case scenario, you go to one of those areas, you're at least going to get $25,000. The amount of funding, state funding that this program has gotten has been increasing in recent years. This past year, every physician who applied got funded, even some that were in obviously the ones who were in the areas of greatest need got funded first, but everyone, even areas that are, say, working in an urban community health center, they got funded as well. Next slide, please. I want to talk about the National Health Service Corps loan repayment program. This is available not only to physicians, but to nurse practitioners, PAs, nurse midwives, dentists, dental hygienists, and then a lot of psychiatrists and other behavioral health clinicians. The commitment is 2 years for $50,000. That's not $50,000 per, but that's $50,000 for a 2-year service obligation. If a clinician is happy where they are and wants to sign an extension, then they can get $20,000 for years 3 and 4, $10,000 for years 5 and 6, and then $5,000 for each additional year. Obviously, it's a better deal for clinicians who don't have a tremendous amount of debt. For most nurse practitioners and PAs, $50,000 will just about get them out of debt. But most physicians and dentists, that's not the case. So this program, while beneficial, is probably not offering anything that you would not get from another healthcare system that doesn't participate in the National Service Corps. Just being frank, if you're a family physician, you're in demand not just by community health centers, but by all the health systems as well. So $50,000 loan repayment bonus for a 2-year obligation would be, in my opinion, pretty standard just about wherever you're going to work. It may not be called loan repayment, but it would be some type of incentive. There is a part-time option with this where you get half the money for working 20 hours a week. The site must be qualified by the National Service Corps. National Service Corps sites have to see all patients regardless of the ability to pay and offer care on a sliding discount fee schedule. This is rigidly enforced by the National Service Corps. As a result, really the only National Service Corps sites that we have in South Carolina are federally qualified health centers or for mental health providers, State Department mental health sites. That's not to say that it's not limited. There are federally qualified health centers in every county in the state and also often multiple sites. So, and there are a few other exceptions that qualify also. And the loan repayment program has become very competitive. HPSAs are scored on a 25-point scale. And recently the scores, they start when they make their awards, they start the highest scores and work down. In these past years, they've only gotten down from 25 to 18 before they ran out of money. And we have a lot of FQHCs that still have that high score and would still qualify. but it's become extremely competitive in recent years. And you have to go through the National Service Corps portal to apply. The application cycle is about 6 weeks long, and it's in the spring. So if you are, say you're in your last year, you would apply into your last year of residency, and you would apply that spring if you've already chosen where you're going to go to practice. And quite frankly, they put you through the ringer with the application, but for $50,000, it's worth it. Next slide, please. This is the program, and I apologize for the crudeness of this slide. I did this one myself. This is the program that I want you to most pay attention to, because I think for family medicine or med students interested in family medicine, this may very well be the program that would benefit you the most. It's the National Service Corps Student to Service Loan Repayment Program. The application cycle is open now and closes November 5th, but you apply during your 4th year of medical school. So for some of you, that may be a couple of years off, but by then you will probably know for certain whether family medicine is where you want to go. If you do, then you could also apply if you're interested in internal medicine, pediatrics, OBGYN, or psychiatry. But you would have more opportunities available in family medicine than those others. There would be opportunities existing for the other specialties too, but not as many. So there you see, after residency, you serve 3 years as a full-time commitment, or you can break that up and do it part-time. But it gives you $120,000. You get the money while you're in residency, so you can go ahead and apply it to your school debt then and avoid the interest that would accumulate while you're in residency. So you may want to remember that one if you remain interested in family medicine when you get into your 4th year. This may well be a program you want to take advantage of. Next slide, please. Just to reiterate the National Service Corps placement conditions, the National Service Corps site, this would be, let's say, Eau Claire Cooperative, because that's one that you're probably all familiar with. They provide a salary and benefits just like they would for any other physician that they're hiring. They cannot reduce that salary or benefits because you're getting a National Service Corps award. It must be in a HIPSA, of course, and they may not discriminate based on the patient's ability to pay. They have to have the sliding fee scale. The clinicians must maintain state license. So if, heaven forbid, you left South Carolina to serve your obligation, you would be obligated to get a license in that state. And you must work full-time or part-time in the program during those years of obligation. With the Student to Service program, I mentioned how high the HIPSA scores have been for people competing for National Service Corps loan repayment. And this is subject to change, but for the years that the Student to Service program has been in place, they've allowed clinicians to match to sites with a HIPSA score of 14 or higher. That's almost every site we have. So you have a lot of options. You also, with the Student to Service program, have the option you have like 6 months to decide whether or not you want to, once you're approved, you have like 6 months to decide whether or not you want to stay. They would tell you the required score, so you'd have an opportunity to look and see what types of sites are available before you agree to accept the award. Next slide, please. The 3RNet. I mentioned the South Carolina Office of Rural Health, which is a fabulous organization, a 501c3 private nonprofit organization. Dr. Graham Adams heads that up. And they do a lot of things, including recruitment and retention. They are the organizational member for South Carolina in 3RNet, which is basically it's a way to share practice opportunities and for clinicians looking for practice opportunities. Jessica Seal, whose information is in this slide deck, is our contact there. So if you're looking for practice opportunities, you can get in touch with Jessica, and she can look at the 3RNet resources and see what might be available of interest to you. And she can also share your information with sites that would be interested. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, Jessica has a list of current job opportunities in rural health clinics, federally qualified health centers, and hospital systems in rural areas. She'd probably also be aware of opportunities in areas that are not rural. Just for a point of clarification, that rural health clinics and federally qualified health centers are provider types that you'll hear often, but they're very different. They're similar in that they both provide care in underserved areas. Rural health clinics are rural, but often they are relatively small. They can be very small. They are not required to see all patients regardless of ability to pay, and they don't get any federal funding. So that's the main difference between them and federally qualified health centers. Federally qualified health centers must see all patients regardless of ability to pay and offer a sliding fee scale. Rural health clinics do often, but they're not required to. Next slide, please. And there's Jessica's contact information so that you can get in touch with her. Next slide, please. There's Kristen's information in case you want to get in touch with her. Next slide, please. And there's mine. That's it. We're glad to take any questions that you might have.
Mark, I want to just let everyone know that some of the links that you talked about, both with your office and for AHEC and the 3RNet, are in the chat box too, if people just want to be able to click. And we have a copy of your slides, so we can get those to you, Holly. I know you like to reach out to all the members of the RHIG with the follow-up, and we'll make sure you have those to be able to share so that everyone has the contact information. Well, if no one has any questions, I have a question for you, Mark. Get the discussion started. When you're working with students and recent graduates for placements, what do you find is really helpful that the students can do to help them find a place that will be a good match for their interests and a place for them to live? What can they do to help prepare themselves to be the most competitive for these programs, and also help determine where would be a good place for them to go?
Well, it depends a lot on the clinician's discipline and specialty. For family medicine, because there's almost universal, it's basically where do you want to work, where do you want to be for family medicine. Now, if it's a PA or a nurse practitioner, we stress that they need to be flexible. As far as where they're willing to work, if getting the incentives is their primary focus. But for family medicine, it's basically where do you want to be? How many hours a week do you want to work? What do you want to do in your practice? Do you want to see kids? Do you want to see pregnant women? What exactly do you want to do, and what restrictions do you have? Jessica Seal at the Office of Rural Health has a profile that she likes the clinicians that she works with to complete so that she has as much information as possible. But a lot of it has to do, if you're open to the whole state, and we can send it to the whole state. If you just want to be in certain areas, you want to be within a certain distance of a city of a certain size. That's one of the great things about South Carolina. You can be, well, if you're in Columbia, you can be anywhere in the state in 3 hours at the most. And there's not really any rural areas even that are not within an hour of a city of some size. So, yeah, the more you know, the more we can help you. But we love it when somebody's just totally flexible and wants to hear from the very rural areas.
I have a question kind of going off of what you just said. So you were saying that like where you pick to practice is like pretty flexible. So if you commit to practice in a community, are you required to live in that community, or are you able to commute back and forth?
That would probably depend on the employer and how they looked at it. But as far as these programs are concerned, no, you don't have to work in that community. Years ago, when I first started, a lot of hospitals required physicians to live there if they were admitting patients, but hospitalists is the norm now. So no, usually you're not required to live in the community.
Okay, thank you.
That is, with like the rural physician program, when we're looking at retention factors, if we see that the clinician lives in Columbia and they're commuting to, I don't know, Camden, then that wouldn't be as favorable as someone who lived in Camden and was applying for a job in Camden, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does.
There are some isolated communities in the state, like Kingstree, Williamsburg County, where we've traditionally had a very difficult time placing clinicians, and we placed physicians and nurse practitioners who lived in Charleston and commuted. It's like an hour and 15 minutes. You do it because you got to have somebody there, but just as soon as the incentives are over, they're probably not going to stay. So rural areas are understanding that people want that lifestyle is very important these days. So they're usually pretty understanding about people wanting to commute.
I'm also curious if, someone does one of these programs and they decide to move to another rural area, would that be an issue with getting like the incentives or their loan repayment?
Well, with the incentive program, as I said, if you don't finish your year, you don't get paid, but there's no penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So worst case scenario, if you want to, and it depends on where you're moving from and where you're moving to. If, for instance, you had agreed to go to Kingstree and you say you want to go to, I don't know, Camden, that's not as underserved a community. Now, if it was the other way around, if you're working in Camden, you want to go to Kingstree, you have our blessing. We'll continue the incentive program for you. So it's not guaranteed. Most of the times, though, when someone transfers, they may be moved to the lower. You would definitely, in that case that I described, where you're starting in a geographic HIPSA and you're moving to an area that's not, the amount of money you get might be reduced. You might be allowed to stay in the program and get a reduced amount. The National Service Corps is different. You have to go through their processes to request a transfer. And they look at HIPSA scores. Is it the same? Is it different? My advice is with the National Service Corps, don't do it unless you maintain some element of flexibility. The state program, the rural physician grant, the worst case scenario is you just don't get continued funding. There's not going to be anybody forcing you to complete your 4 years. But it happens a lot. People request transfers a lot.
I had a question too. So about with the incentives, when the incentives are up, do physicians usually stay in that same area, or do they go ahead and move somewhere else once they're?
That's a great question. The retention reports that we've seen are very positive.
Okay.
I can't quote you an exact percentage, but the numbers are quite high. A lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that they choose the practice site before they sign up for the incentive. So they kind of know where they want to go ahead of time. But the retention is quite good.
That's good. Thank you.
And you can only do one of these programs at a time. You could do the state program or the National Service Corps, both. But you could say do the National Service Corps and then do the state program, or vice versa. So you could do, say, the National Service Corps loan repayment program for 2 years, get $50,000 for your school loans, and then apply for the rural physician grant and get, $120,000.
Thank you.
I had another question about applying for the National Health Service Corps. I've just kind of heard like through the grapevine that it can be complicated to apply for. And I was wondering if you've heard that as well, and if you know of any resources that we should like use when we apply for it.
Yeah, I can verify it is. They, as I said, they put you through the ringer. Now, I didn't mention the National Service Corps Scholarship Program. There's also that program. Frankly, I don't recommend that. Are all of you in second year?
I think there's some first years.
Okay. The scholarship program works like this. You get funded year for year. So if your first year, you could apply maybe, I guess, and get 3 years of funding. That might be worth it. But after, say, second year, if you're only getting 2 years, it's a minimum 2-year obligation. See, by third year, you've probably already incurred a lot of school debt. So the scholarship the scholarship program is also pretty inflexible on the when you come out. You have to go to a very high scoring site. So it may be a very limited number of places you can go to serve your obligation. That may be the application that you were referring to, Salem. And it can be difficult. They usually have for scholarship program, for student service, for the traditional loan repayment program, they usually have sessions. If you go to their website, they'll let you know when they're going to have a help session online, so that you can see, give you some tips on when to apply and what needs to be included. But it is definitely time consuming versus the state program, which you could probably do their application in a lunch hour. So it's just the level of information that the feds require. A lot of it having to do with verifying your student loans, because the state program is an incentive program and not based on student loans. That's a whole lot of information they don't have to give.
Hey, Mark, a question came in from the chat from Sydney. She says, I know some of these are available for PAs and NPs. Are any of these physician only, or are they all available for PAs and NPs?
They're all available for NPs and PAs except for the National Service Corps Student to Service program. That program is only available to physicians and dentists. But the National Service Corps Loan Repayment Program and the State Incentive Grant Program are available to nurse practitioners and PAs. Can we freeze up? Nope.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for giving that presentation. That was super informative. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.